Hi everyone, I'm Christine and I was a 2016 Korean CLS applicant and recipient. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about my experiences of what I did there and maybe my daily routines and a little bit of that. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is what life was like on a weekly sort of program for a CLS applicant. So basically, we would go to class for 6 hours a day, and we'd go from 9 to 12, which was our first class of the day, and then we'd go from 1 to 3, I believe it was, or 1 to 4. And so we would have basically a whole 6-hour day kind of planned out for us. And we would do that every day for the week, and every night I would go home and I would study. And then at the end of the week, we would have a test, or at the end of every 2 weeks, we'd have maybe a midterm, a larger kind of a test, and it could be speaking or writing or something like that. So weekly, you would be able to interact with everybody else who's in your class. You would also be able to intermingle with people at different levels. And the entire time that you're there, the best thing is that it's a total immersion as far as language learning goes. So no English, at least for our program, there was no English allowed in the hallways. Your teachers kind of called you out if you started speaking English, which was good and bad in parts, because if you're on campus and you just want to hang out with your friends, the whole point of the program is to be immersive, so you try not to speak English. And then we'd have smaller field trips on the weekends as well. I think we had 4 smaller field trips and I think 2 bigger ones, or it might have been 2 big ones and 2 small ones. I don't quite remember. But basically we did field trips, and we'd go and we'd stay at hotels, I guess, for some of them. So we'd go stay at them if it was a longer weekend visit. If it was a shorter one, we would just kind of go for the day and then we'd come back on the bus. Which also was really fun because you got to talk, usually your language partners came with you as well, and you got to talk with them on the bus in Korean a lot, and you got to see all the different levels of people that were in your program, so that was really cool. And then of course, after class, or on the weekends when you weren't busy, you'd hang out with your language partner, and I loved my language partner. Her and I still sometimes send letters back and forth. We got pretty close, especially since my Korean improved so much. I was able to bond with her as a friend, not just a language partner, so that was a lot of fun. And your host family, depending on who you stay with. I stayed with 2 single females, and so they were roommates, and they would take me out shopping or eating all the time. It was awesome. And they were so good about speaking Korean with me when I was home. And so week to week, it pretty much would be hang out with your host family or the other people from your program and do homework, and then go to class. Now, for day to day, I'd wake up around 7:30, I'd give myself breakfast, and usually between 7:45 and 7:50, so I tend to sleep in pretty late, and I would just throw stuff on and then go, because the bus would show up around 7:50, and I'd have to ride the bus, and it took about an hour and 10 minutes sometimes an hour and 20, depending on traffic, or especially if it was raining. So I'd ride the bus, and I would use that time to review my flashcards. I always had my flashcards with me of just vocabulary that I'd be reviewing, because I wanted to get really good and I wanted to get better with the language. So if I was really lucky, I got a seat on the bus, but normally it was too packed with people, so you'd do an hour, 10-ish minutes for me to get to class. You'd walk onto campus, and then you would go to class at 9 a.m. And then your first teacher would start, and they would do their lesson for you. You'd get an hour break for lunch, and then your second teacher would start. And depending on the teacher that you get and the level that you're at, it kind of depends on what your teacher's going to cover. So mine would cover in the morning. We would do a lot more grammar and proper language learning as far as conjugations and verbs. And then the second half of the afternoon for us was more conversational. So we got to talk a lot more, and our professor was really good at kind of just being say more, say more. So that was kind of how that went. And then at around 3 or 4, depending on how long the class had been, we would all stop class at the same time, and there was a cafe right next door to our learning area. So we would all go there, and then sometimes we would study together, or if it was a Tuesday or a Thursday, you would have special activities. So the special activity that I chose was Taekwondo and K-pop dancing. And halfway through the program, they switch. And again, it depends on the program, but that's how they worked with the Korean program. And so then Tuesday, Thursday, you would go, I think it was at like 5 o'clock, and you would go for about an hour or two. And you would do more Korean immersion by either taking the Taekwondo lesson or K-pop. You could also do cooking. You could also do traditional Korean crafts or history lessons, I think. And you got to pick the top ones that you wanted, and then depending on how popular they were, they would put you in those programs or those classes. And then at the end of that, I would grab dinner either with a couple friends on campus. We could either go out to eat because we were in a college town, so really easy to just kind of walk out and go find a restaurant to go eat. The food there is also pretty cheap. And for me, I would either, again, eat, or if I felt like I really wanted to go home and study, I'd go home and then I'd eat with my host family, depending on their plans for the day, or how late I had to do homework. And then after that, I would usually do homework from about 7:30 or 8 until about 11. And it was just doing whatever was in my workbook or learning new vocabulary, doing the homework assigned for the day. And then sometimes I would try and journal in Korean. I wasn't very good at it, but I really wanted to try. So that's typically what my day looked like, and I'd head to bed probably around 11:30, and then I'd wake up again at 7:30 and do the whole thing again. I'd have to say what I found most difficult about the program was definitely the intensity of the speed at which you were learning. So it was 3 months, and I crammed a full year's worth of language studies into 3 months, which is quite a lot. Even if you're a very fast learner, it's a lot to take in, and I can tell that even with people who are really good, it might take its toll at some point. So I think that the speed at which you were learning stuff, if you didn't stay on top of it, it was pretty difficult. But on the other hand, by the time I left, I was like fully conversational in Korean, and it was great. I remember leaving there being so proud and being like, I could hold a full conversation. It may not be perfect. I could communicate myself through the language, so that was the coolest part for me.